Welcome to Working for Women, the Independent Women's Forum podcast, where we are changing the conversation about women and public policy for the better.
Hello, my name is Patrice Onwuka, and I'm a senior policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum. Welcome to our listeners. Those who serve our country, their spouses and their families make tremendous sacrifices. A good education should not be one of those. According to a recent study, more than a third of military personnel have considered leaving the military service due to dissatisfaction with their children's education. Washington is on a march to empower parents to invest in their children's education, and there are efforts in Congress to expand school choice for military families so that they can craft the best educations for their kids. Today, our esteemed guest is a member of Congress who introduced legislation to help family members in this way. Representative Jim Banks, Republican from Indiana, sits on the House Armed Services Committee, so he thinks about these issues. Congressman, thank you so much for your time, and we are very pleased to have you join us to talk about efforts in helping military families.
Hey, thank you very much. It's great to be with you.
Sir, I'd love for you just to jump right in and tell us what kind of challenges do military families face in educating their children?
Well, look, first of all, this is a very unique population. Our men and women in uniform who raise their right hand and make that difficult but very important choice to make the sacrifice to serve our country. And the last thing that we want our men and women to be concerned about when they join the military is ensuring that their children receive a good education. So I hear stories all the time from military families. Again, a unique population that every 2 to 3 years moves from one place to another. And that move is often made more difficult because they leave one school district where their children flourish and do well, and the uncertainty when they move to a new base, a new location, a new school district, sometimes that's the most difficult part of moving from one place to another, is making sure that their children receive a good education. So roughly half of our military families have some school choice option in the state that they move to. But that means half of our military families don't have a school choice option. If they don't choose the public school option, then they have to pay the additional cost to send their children to a private school, or if they choose to homeschool, the cost that come out of their pocket to do that. This piece of legislation would create education savings accounts and use federal impact aid dollars, which are used currently to subsidize public schools in areas that have a military base, retooling those dollars to allow them to follow the child and give parents, men and women in uniform, more support so they can make the best educational choice for their families. It's an exciting effort that I've heard emotional stories from so many men and women who say this would make a tremendous difference for them and their kids' lives.
That's terrific. I think you hit on my next follow-up question, which was, talking about the benefit of school choice to military families. And it sounds like this would be an effort to make those benefits really portable because military families are really on the move. What is the difference, the challenges that that military families face compared to civilian families when it comes to education? Is it just that portability, or are there other issues?
When you move from one place to another, it's just that uncertainty. At the end of the day, that the emotional toll that it takes on the parents who worry about whether or not their kids are going to fit in, whether or not they're going to get the best education possible when they move to that next school district. That's a distraction from our men and women in uniform focusing on what they ultimately are there to do, which is training and doing the hard and important work of keeping America safe and secure. So at the end of the day, this is about that. Our men and women in uniform should never have to worry about whether or not their kids get a good education. And this piece of legislation, in a very simple way, would provide these education savings accounts, which are portable, which would be federal dollars that are already intended for this purpose, to follow these families and allow them to make the best choice that they can. It might be a private school. It might be homeschooling and helping to offset some of the cost of homeschooling. At the end of the day, it allows these families to make the best decision, choose the best option for them and their kids, that's why I'm very proud to introduce this legislation in the Congress.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about a common sense solution to helping families really deal with, military families address education needs. I can't imagine that there are people who would oppose the idea of school choice. I'm joking a little bit, but this does sound like a very common sense bipartisan approach. When we talk about educational savings plans, particularly for military families. Is there opposition, and how do you address their concerns if there is?
Well, of course there is, and I come from a state in Indiana where we do have school choice. We have the largest voucher program in the country. We have charter schools. We have we've created an environment of choice in our state so that families can make the best choices for their children's education. So we have this debate all the time in the state of Indiana, and now in introducing this piece of legislation, I got to say I didn't expect it. I didn't expect that a piece of legislation like this, which is truly common sense, would have resistance from those who have the same ideological viewpoint opposed to school choice because they don't want to see any dollars taken away from a public school. So there's a lot of irony in that. I mean, the federal impact aid dollars exist to help schools and locations where a military base exists that doesn't pay a military installation that doesn't pay property taxes. But whenever a child of a military family goes to a public school, the dollars follow them. If they don't go to the public school, then those dollars don't go to the public school to begin with anyway. So there's a lot of irony here on other notes as well. When we send our families overseas, for example, we give them a voucher to allow them to choose the best school choice option for them overseas. The fact that we don't allow for any type of choice in the United States of America, I think, is troublesome, and this piece of legislation would solve that.
I think you just hit on a really interesting point that maybe a lot of folks haven't heard about this idea. It's that, overseas military families are able to exercise educational choice. Why can't they do that here? I really appreciate
that's right. A great deal of irony there. That's right.
Absolutely. We talk at the Independent Women's Forum a lot about, just coming up with these common sense solutions, and education is one of those issues that women deeply, deeply care about. And so when we think about women as military spouses and service women, I know very much that they are thinking about how they can ensure their kids have access to the best educations they can. Congressman, with just a couple of minutes left, is there anything that you'd like to let our audience know about this broad movement to really help military families deal with providing education for their kids?
Well, we have about 50 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives for my bill, and one way that military families can help is by reaching out to their member of Congress and asking them to take a look at this piece of legislation, the Education Savings Account for Military Families Act, and perhaps your listeners, your members, they might be able to influence their member of Congress to become a co-sponsor of the bill as well. So as we move forward throughout the rest of 2018, we're getting close. We're getting into an election cycle. There are a lot of distractions this year, but this is a piece of legislation that I believe, with all due respect, would really make a difference in the lives of families in the United States and those unique families who make sacrifices to serve us and to serve our country. I served in the Navy. I deployed to Afghanistan. My wife stepped up and had the weight of the world on her shoulders as she took care of our 3 young daughters, as she took care of all of our responsibilities at home while I was deployed to Afghanistan. The last thing that I wanted to have to think about was whether or not my kids were getting a good education. And in our case was unique and different. But I heard those stories from the other men and women who I served with every day that often that's what was on their mind, what was going on in their kids' lives, what was going on at their kids' schools. This is a piece of legislation that would ease and comfort many of those families and give them a better shot at a better education for their kids. They certainly deserve it.
That's terrific. Congressman, thank you so much, not just for your time this afternoon, but for your military service and just for leading our nation right now. To all of our listeners today, thank you so much for tuning in. As we always say at the Independent Women's Forum, all issues are women's issues. And so we're really proud to bring you common sense solutions, to education and helping those who serve our service here and abroad every day. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us today. And for those who are interested in learning more about this issue, I encourage you to visit our sister organization, the Independent Women's Voice, at iwv.org, at Independent Women's Voice, to learn more about this specific piece of legislation. But generally, visit our website at IWF for more on educational savings plans and options to help bring choice to young people across our country. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please give it a thumbs up, share it on social media, or stop by IWF.org for similar content.